So as I've shared many times before, we've been eating a whole food plant-based diet as a family for the past 14 years. It'll be 15 this summer. One of the keys for us is to make sure we focus on keeping our meals starch centered. So they're easy to cook up. In the Instant Pot, I make sure I always have plenty of dried whole grains, legumes, and then fresh potatoes, often sweet potatoes as well, on hand and cooked. So at any given moment, you can open my fridge and see containers of plain steamed rice, plain steamed potatoes, and plain steamed quinoa, for example. Case in point, there is cooked quinoa. There are cooked potatoes, more cooked potatoes down here with a giant eat sign. My husband knows then he has free reign and he's not going to be eating the foods the boys want to eat. And then down here, plain chickpeas and some rice and beans as well. So a more prepared dish, but also just more microwave. And then we'll just literally steam up some veggies, use some condiments if desired. I actually like eating my starches plain with veggies on the side often. And that's a meal. And while I do make some recipes, genuine recipes where I, as you've seen on this channel, very loosely follow a specific combination of ingredients, very often I'll just look in my cupboard and just feel like, well, let's throw these things together and make sure a starch is at the center. So I wanted to just walk you through what that process could look like. This recipe or combination actually arose because we were recently traveling and I didn't want to buy a whole bunch of ingredients. So I only had millet and brown rice on hand, and I was just trying to find different ways of making those interesting, and I had a little extra free time on my hands. So I just played around with this, and my husband ended up saying, wow, I love this. I don't usually like millet all that much. It's not my favorite grain, but I love what you did with it. So I thought I'd share. So I use the Instant Pot, of course, and I have whole grain millet. I just buy mine in bulk, usually 25-pound bags on Amazon. And then I have some dried onion, dried garlic. You could totally use fresh if you have that on hand. It'll probably taste even better. And then I have salt-free diced tomatoes, just one can of those. Although I've been thinking, I wonder if it would even taste good with also a can of salt-free tomato sauce. And then some oregano, some basil. Again, you could use fresh ingredients. That would be great. And today, I didn't do this when we were traveling, but I think I'm going to throw in a few dried mushrooms as well. Costco had these in again, and they're really, really nice. They cook up well in the Instant Pot. I have not had great success with stovetop rehydration of mushrooms generally because we like our food pretty well cooked, but I love them in the Instant Pot. And this sort of has a little bit of a pizza-y flavor because of the tomatoes and oregano and basil. So I have a feeling it's going to go really nicely with it. So I'm going to throw those in today too. Okay, so our fast food meal, because that's really what this amounts to. It takes all of 2 minutes to put together. So I pour in my millet. I'm going to go get 6 cups of water. I had 2 cups of millet. And I tend to find, though I'm probably the anomaly here, I need a lot of water for millet. I cook it with 3 times as much water as grain. Your mileage may vary, so this is just what we like to do. So I added 6 cups of water, even a tiny bit extra just because the dried mushrooms, not much so, because there's also the diced tomatoes, which are very liquidy. So I kind of throw those in. I do not measure ingredients pretty much ever unless the recipe really depends on it. So I just throw in a lot of diced onion. Actually, I'm going to probably empty this. I sometimes would have even thrown in more than that. A little bit of garlic, not too terribly much, I think. Maybe, I don't know, half a teaspoon, like that. And then basil. I often find that a little goes a long way. Oh, that was too much. That's what happens when I'm talking and doing this. I'd say like a teaspoon would probably be good. That was probably a little much. Although basil's more forgiving. I find oregano, if I go too heavy with that, my kids don't love it. Oddly, I guess it almost has a little bit of a licoricey flavor to me. So I wonder if it's just too much for them. Anyway, so just a tiny bit. I'll be more careful of the oregano. Probably like no more than half a teaspoon for us. You might like more. And then today I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to add in some dried mushrooms. I like to break these down into pretty small, like this is fine, but some of these are in really large chunks, and I just think it's going to distribute more readily if I just make sure they're a little bit broken down here. And they crumble pretty easily, or snap, let's call it. These are really, really nice. Costco didn't have them for a very long time, like years. We used to buy them when we first went plant-based, and then they stopped carrying them. And my husband especially is a huge fan of strong flavors, so he loves these because they, they're gourmet mushrooms, so they have some pretty strong tasting ones, and they have a really nice chewy texture when they cook up in the Instant Pot. Okay, that's it. All right, so now any faithful viewers know why I love the Instant Pot so much. It's the fix it and forget it. So I just threw this all in the pot, one pot, and I just put the lid on, make sure that this cutout is here. I turn fully to the right, just follow the signs, it says close. Then I make sure that this little thing is turned to sealing so it will come to pressure as opposed to venting. It does not click, you just have to make sure it's kind of in that direction. And then I usually always just use the pressure cook function. The only exception to that is I had started several months ago making yogurt very occasionally for the boys, a soy yogurt. There's a video of that on the channel. But otherwise, it is pressure cook. That's it. The old Instant Pots, I think, called it manual. So just pressure cook. And I'm going to make this start right away. And I'm going to up the time using these plus and minus to 20 minutes. That's how long we like to cook millet for. You might have to experiment and decide. I cook things for a lot longer than a lot of people do, it seems, in the Instant Pot, but that's what works for us. And I don't know, maybe it's something to do with our Instant Pots or where we are located geographically. I don't know, but we like it that way. And now I will just leave it. It will come to a boil and come to pressure and cook and release all on its own. And I can just come back to it whenever I have time once it's naturally pressure released, and it will keep just fine. That is the huge benefit of the Instant Pot. I don't have to sit and babysit it now while it comes to boil and worry about the starch boiling over onto my stove and having to clean up that mess, and then having to be ready exactly when it's finished so that it doesn't overcook and start burning in the pan. So this is just Instant Pot is a huge, huge time saver if you are trying to eat whole food plant-based, even as an individual, but especially as a family. It's just a lot of cooking to do, and you don't want to be babysitting it. So as usual, I got caught up with a zillion other tasks, and this has now been pressure released for nearly an hour, but that's okay. Wouldn't be okay on a stovetop if I had neglected it once it was already cooked, but it absolutely is fine in the pressure cooker. One of the reasons I love it. So I'm just turning to the right to open it up here. It says open, follow the directions, and there it is. See the oregano kind of clumped over there. There's some mushroom. And this is pretty watery. I probably could have used a tiny bit less water, but with natural ingredients, it's always a little different. It's still going to be very tasty. And you can just adjust and figure out what works for you. Experiment. It's hard to really mess it up when you're using starches and natural ingredients. It will always taste reasonable. So these are little mushroom chunks. You can see it cooked really nicely. The millet grains stay kind of separate. It's almost a tiny little bit, I don't know, like a little bit like couscous, I would say, millet. But if you have never tried it, really, you should give it a try. It's really unique. It's one of my absolute favorite grains, actually, even just to eat plain. But I know I'm a little weird. And then, as usual, you've been watching our channel, I've often talked about our family. We just eat when we're hungry. So we'll eat some of this fresh, and then I just put it in these individual containers, which I love because they stack really nicely in the fridge, and we can microwave right inside these glass containers, these Pyrex ones. So I'll just scoop it probably about a little bit more full than that. If it's for my kids, that's probably about right. If it's for my husband or myself, we'll usually go more like this. Okay. And then we can just nuke it and reheat it whenever we're hungry. And so I try to have a variety in the fridge of different just plain starches, cooked meals like this. Always have veggies. We always have lots of frozen vegetables that I can just steam easily. And this is an easy way we keep ourselves fueled. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, and also feel free to comment below. Ask questions if you have any other questions about how we have made this lifestyle work for our family for the past 14 years. Our boys eat this way. They love it. They're proud to eat healthy. I wasn't sure how that would go as they're getting older now, but they really seem proud to be healthy and fit and able to run longer than any of the other kids in their age group. And I think a lot of it is because they're just eating quality fuel that gives their bodies the energy and nutrients they need to thrive.